True crimers, welcome to Break the Case. I'm your host. I'm Jen Coffindaffer. So excited to be here tonight to talk to you about the Sebastian Rogers case. Now, I know most people in our audience knows about little Sebastian, 15 years old. He is on the spectrum. He went missing from Hendersonville, Tennessee, February 26th. The 25th was actually his last proof of life in terms of being on video outside of information provided by his mother, Katie Proudfoot. He lived with Katie and Chris Proudfoot. His father is Seth Rogers. Unfortunately, we don't have that beautiful co-parenting situation like in the Petito case, as an example. We have people who literally cannot stand each other, who fight and file suits against each other, and just issues from A to Z, really. So in any event, unfortunately, Sebastian is in the middle of all that firestorm. We've all been watching it, but I wanted to bring in a very special guest to really take a look at this from another slant that really I haven't heard people talk about. And we're going to talk about it in a very general sense. And we're also going to hone in specifically on the Sebastian Rogers case. That angle that I really want to talk about are the parents of Sebastian Rogers and other missing people. We saw it with Riley Strain. We're seeing it really across the true crime spectrum with missing people here on this Missing Monday, where parents now are hiring attorneys. So I have the best attorney to talk to me, to talk with us about this, and that's Josh Schiffer. And why did I want him of all the different attorneys? Listen, he's practicing. He's worked every aspect of law, criminal and civil, and he can just really, I think, break it down. So without further ado, here we go. Welcome to the stage. Hi, Schiff.
Hey, Jen, how are you? Thank you so much for inviting me to talk about this important case and really the important issue of how and why lawyers are getting involved more and more in cases where, when I was growing up, that wasn't really how lawyers got involved. You know, it's really a brand new development to see how these major high-profile missing individual cases are being changed and treated through a combination of the press and also how law enforcement treats them, and why lawyers are getting involved when everybody just wants this little boy back.
You're right. When I look back at Amber Hageman, which she disappeared off of her bike, was abducted, was murdered in Arlington, Texas. And that was my AOR with the FBI for almost a dozen years. And that's just not something people did back then. And as you said, it's just emerging. So help bring us to, why do you think, generally speaking, we won't focus on Sebastian right now, generally speaking, why are parents seeking legal help, in some cases, right from the get-go?
Well, let's step back and see what society really promises them as parents, and reverse roles and get inside that parent perspective. Because really, you'll understand a lot more how and why lawyers are getting involved and how these cases are proceeding in the modern times, as opposed to 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago. And Sebastian Rogers is a really fantastic example of how and why families have chosen to get some professional assistance when they're facing something they've never faced before. And one of the things I talk about with anybody when they go get a lawyer, when they're involved in any part of the criminal justice system, you don't have any experience doing this. Unless your family was involved in law enforcement prosecution, unless you were raised by a lawyer, your parents didn't give you the tools to really navigate an increasingly complex pathway to dealing with an inquiry from law enforcement, how media and society looks at what used to be just a tragedy. You know, when I was being raised, we had the missing and murdered children in Atlanta in the late 70s and early 80s. And it froze the community. We have had so many different issues in my lifetime where there are missing children, where there are these disappearances. And it used to be that everybody got together and helped find the child, helped find the person. And I think that a lot of people think that still exists. And unfortunately, we've gotten to a modern place in society when someone goes missing, law enforcement has to treat everyone like a suspect. And that has some benefits, but it's also got some real costs. And the costs in that, in many ways, is the health and the sanity and the well-being of the people left behind, of the people who are missing, whoever it is that has gone astray. And then when you take that, you place them not just in the position of a traumatized loved one who is missing someone who doesn't have the answers as to where they are. You've got that, but you combine on that an automatic inquiry by all law enforcement that they may be involved and there may be a suspect. And the idea that no parent could ever do anything so horrible. Unfortunately, we've seen parents do indescribably indefensible things. And that's when lawyers start really popping up. So when we look at something like the Sebastian Rogers case, where we have the custodial parent and spouse and a regular schedule, and she goes in to get little Sebastian at 6 o'clock in the morning, and he's gone. He's gone. She spoke to him earlier in that night, said, stop it, whatever you're doing. But she wakes up and a 15-year-old boy is gone. A 15-year-old boy who had substantial function, could obviously go to school, talk with people, but arguably didn't have the judgment, didn't have the sophistication to recognize some of the threats that we as parents are always worried about. And when we have kids, especially kids that aren't functioning like other kids, we're always going to be worried about the predators out there. As society gets bigger, we're up to almost 300 million Americans. Even at the most minor rate of bad people existing, we just have a bigger population. And that doesn't mean you're more likely to be injured or more likely to have something bad happen, but it's more likely that bad things are going to happen overall because there's that many more of us. And so these parents have had to go forward, and I believe everybody in the Rogers case has gotten a lawyer. And then we can also compare that for some other families of people that, missing or not, where they need somebody to come in and help manage a process that's scary and intimidating. The one I think about immediately is the Landry family. And I know that they did some things that are, I'll just say it, pretty indefensible. I can't imagine the torture, but put on that lawyer hat. And putting on that lawyer hat really changes your perspective about what you're trying to do as a practitioner to help people.
Let me ask you this, Chef, because I found it very interesting. If I were in this situation and I had nothing to do with the disappearance of my child, nothing, I would just want to come forward, want to be as cooperative as possible. And we sort of saw that, in a sense, from all three of these parental units, from Dad Seth, from Chris, from Katie Proudfoot, right? They started talking to the media. They were, essentially trying to be transparent. They were taking interviews. And of course, all of that has pretty much shut down on the Proudfoot side, on Mama's side. But say I am somebody who the magnifying glass starts focusing and social pressure and so on, I'm starting to be looked at as a possible suspect, even though law enforcement hasn't said that. Where do you go to find a missing person parent lawyer?
So the first thing, and it's really for any professional service, you need to talk to the people that you know in your community. Hopefully someone knows a lawyer that it cares. Because really when it comes to the lawyer's specific skill set, You want someone who is experienced in criminal law, and you want someone who's experienced in dealing with, facilitating with law enforcement in a non-confrontational professional manner. A lot of lawyers are always on this gung-ho, cops are the enemy, DAs are the enemy, the other side's the enemy. That's not necessarily the lawyer that you're going to want to go find, because really the lawyer for a case like this needs to be both a shield bearer to protect you from unnecessary intrusion, to protect you from harassment, and unfortunately the tricky questions that law enforcement is required to ask. Even if the people aren't suspects, law enforcement has to do a substantial investigation, because that's how you build a sufficient and complete investigation. If you see that some angle in a case has never been investigated, that's something the defense will key in on all the time. So law enforcement has an obligation to investigate everyone, at least to a reasonable degree. That includes custodial and caring and loving parents who miss their kid more than anything. And I think that missing the kid and how that's manifested in the Rogers case is what's causing a lot of interest. And I think that probably has to do with what lawyers told these parents and step-parents how to act. Because really the easiest pathway, if you show up at my office and say, Josh, I've got an issue, doesn't really matter what the issue is. Criminal, civil, first thing I'm going to tell you to do is shut up. There is nothing most litigants can add to a situation that benefits the situation. That's why you have a lawyer. You can think of a lawyer as a megaphone, but a megaphone with a regulator on it. And that megaphone's going to amplify your message, amplify your position, but it's going to do it in a controlled and restrained and proper way that doesn't expose you to the gotcha questions and answers that are oftentimes found in high intensity litigation. And one of the big red flags for me in the Rogers case specifically, or not even a red flag, but a problem flag, is this divorce, is this separate families, and the dynamic, the triangle that exists by just mere operation of law between these two parents, as they don't share equal custody of their kid. Their kid has some special needs. Miss Proudfoot's moved on. Seth's dad hasn't, I don't believe, doesn't have a spouse. And they were getting along very well, but I really question how that's changed. Because once you start applying the pressure of the media and the pressure of law enforcement will tell us what's really happening. We don't believe that this person's telling us the truth. When you start injecting that into a stable relationship between co-parents, ex-spouses, you're gonna just run into and breed conflict, because everyone wants their kid back, or at least that's what it looks like. Or does it? Because that's really the thing that I think everyone's keyed in on with this Rogers case, is for parents missing their kids, the manifestation of that missing, that loneliness, that loss, hasn't occurred in the way that most people feel it should. And that's, I believe, really the root of all the inquiry. Why aren't you as upset as you may have been, or as I would feel I would be, if my 15-year-old disappeared and, from what it looks like, a second party was involved? And that sends my mind in the worst directions, because I know child predators. I know them. They're out there. They're absolutely out there, and child predators will do horrific things. It's an incredibly minuscule and small part of our population. It's tiny. It does exist.
So I want to key off of a couple of things you said. One thing you talked about was, if you're going to get a lawyer in this type of a situation, you want someone that has a great relationship with law enforcement. And I just wanted to really impress upon that being, I think, the key issue. I can tell you personally, the relationships I had with defense attorneys were so strong that if you look on my reference sheet, my number one reference was a defense attorney. Now he's a judge because of that working relationship. Yes, we might not have seen eye to eye on the case, but you want somebody who understands the prosecution side, the law enforcement side. And I'm so glad you brought that up, because the attorneys that cause rifts, that cause issues with everybody involved, whether it's the media, whether it's law enforcement, whether it's the prosecutor, stay away, because those are not, in my opinion, a good counsel in any situation, but certainly in this one. So I appreciate that point you made. The second thing I wanted to ask you about is, you know what we're seeing a lot of that I think leads us then to the attorneys is this middleman. So we've seen it with Seth Rogers has acquired, not hired, he's not paid, Tony Mathis. And then in the case of the Proudfoots, I believe they're using a Twitter person that's been involved in Kylie Rodney. I think he now has a private investigator license. Anyway, using kind of that person as their mouthpiece. What do you have to say about that? These private individuals who aren't attorneys sort of being middlemen.
Huge problems with that, because and it carries on from what you were just talking about. The reason you had strong relationships and law enforcement has strong relationships with the defense, it's ethics. It's ethics. Everything's based on ethics and a strong belief in ethics and reliance on ethics, where when you get into these unlicensed random people from this, there are no ethics. It's my problem with the citizen journalism issue, whereas journalists, professional journalists, have ethics. They fact check stories. They don't just repeat slander and libel and rumors. They have ethics. And the same with lawyers and prosecutors. It's the ethics that make the profession reliable. And I do push back on one thing. I will say that there's a time and a place for every kind of lawyer. And there is a time and a place for that scorched earth, burn it down lawyer, both on the state and the defense side. This just isn't that. What you really need, like you're saying, is that lawyer who has strong relationships because they work with the state. They work in conjunction with the state to ensure the best results for their clients, while at the same time preserving their ability to zealously represent and push back and deny what the state wants and stand up for their clients. When we get to these third parties, and even some lawyers, step back and look at this using your critical thinking skills. Why is this person getting involved? And I'll automatically give everybody the benefit of the doubt that they're nice people trying to do a good thing. I got it. That's absolutely fine. You can be a nice person. I donate time all the time. I do pro bono. I think most lawyers do. I do all kinds of stuff. That exists. But it's kind of rare to see someone get this involved, start giving this much reliable or intentionally reliable information and guidance without some sort of benefit to them. And what I see time and time again, and we're seeing this in a couple of high-profile cases, lawyers that are addicted to a little bit of fame jumping into a case. And sometimes that can be fantastic. There are some lawyers that are press hounds that just want to chase that headline, and they're great lawyers. Unfortunately, that's not as common as I think people want to believe. There are a ton of lawyers that don't do a really great job out there. There are. I know that just shocks everybody, that there are lawyers that aren't in it for the right reason, and or only in it for sort of the right reason or part of the right reason. And that becomes really dangerous when you're talking about going out and guiding a case from the beginning that has an unknown destination, because if someone's involved wanting to exploit the situation for clicks or fame or what, that's not necessarily in your client's best interest. And you always, as a lawyer, have to find out who you represent and what their best interest is. And you are not allowed to work against it. doesn't stop people. And it's shameful to see there are lawyers that and other people that just flog the headline for clicks rather than actually trying to move something positive forward. And I think people are subject to being schnookered by these counselors, whatever you want to call them, advisors, because they provide this safety in this pathway. At least that's what the promises are, even though those promises aren't necessarily going to come true. I don't care what your buddy down the street who knows the media tells. The police are going to do what the police are going to do. Law enforcement's going to do what law enforcement's going to do. No one has some magic wand where they can change the operations of how the system works. And unfortunately, we see people get really burned and lose the narrative when they're relying on the wrong kind of people to work with and manage their case.
Well, let me focus for a minute on, I want to take the father, Seth Rogers, separate from the Proudfoots, because I think that each of those entities has very special needs in terms of issues that they've had. Quickly with Seth Rogers, the father. So some of his biggest concerns early on, of course, were it hit the news all about this restraining order that was sought by Katie Proudfoot. He had to turn in his weapons. This was in California in 2016. And so he sort of became, all of a sudden, even though he has a clear alibi, recall he is still not cleared by police. No one is cleared by police. But yet it seems very improbable that he had anything to do with Sebastian going missing. But some of the issues he's had beyond these aspersions that have been cast at him are also the fact that the individual, a private investigator and other people that he apparently hired initially or, asked to come help him, or they volunteered and inserted themselves. Now he wants them away from the case, and he's sent out letters, cease and desist type letters, stay away from my child's investigation, period, end of story. What do you think about the counsel he was given? And I don't know, he does have an attorney. I don't know whether his attorney gave him that advice or whether it was Tony, his advisor. Somebody gave him that advice to get rid of that whole gang that first started. I don't mean gang in a bad way.
No.
So what do you think about that?
I think that his most recent advice to get rid of these people is spot on. And I think it probably comes out of the fact that when he experienced this explosion in his life, a missing child, certainly there was some existing conflict with Miss Proudfoot, and he got burned. He thought that when he got out there and told his truth, people were going to listen and accept it. And there's way too much cynicism out there. I see it all the time with people. Josh, just let me get in front of them and I'll tell them and I'll explain it. They'll understand. No, dude. No.
Don't do it.
What a suckers bet that. What does the most guilty person in the world scream? I'm innocent. I'm innocent. I'm innocent. You are not able as yourself to be a good advocate for you, because everything you say is going to be taken and chewed up through the machine of lawyer thought and litigation thought and law enforcement thought. And what that does is it parses out your life, and you can have led a saintly existence, except for that time you lied about that theft of $12. And then next thing you know, somebody has run with it. And the problem with the masses, the problem with the audience that gobbles up all this true crime, the truth doesn't matter for so many of them. And we've all experienced that. We've all seen the arguments online where people are just yelling at each other and they won't listen to it. It doesn't matter what the truth is to some people, because they're never going to see it. They're never going to consider it. They've already decided what their truth is, and they're going to run with it. And I think that's really what happened with Dad here, is that he brought some people in upon recommendation. These people had all promised him that they cared about him, and some of them might Pretty certain many of them don't. Pretty certain a lot of them are concerned about how do I get my name into social media? How do I get my business out there? Remember, there's big bucks in parts of the law. Parts of the law, not big parts. Most criminal defense is public defense. We're scrambling for most criminal defendants to get resources. I know we all like to talk about how much money the big dogs make, and they do, but that's a really small percentage of criminal defendants. Most people are really kind of struggling with the resources and expenses of dealing with any kind of investigation, criminal or otherwise. And so they've welcomed in these people to help guide and assist, and those people have taken advantage of the situation. So I'm very happy that these people are being pushed away. And my fear is that these allegedly well-intentioned people damage the integrity of the state's case. We already put so much importance on the work of law enforcement, investigators, detectives, prosecutors. We put burden upon for all the right reasons. I'm not complaining about the burden. But we do that, and then what happens if someone from a third party comes in and screws it all up? Starts talking out of school, doesn't know what's going on, creates additional narratives, creates additional stories, creates additional pathways. Now, if I'm a criminal defense lawyer, the more alternatives I see, the better. I want there to be 50 statements because I can pull them apart and I can make people look at them and I can make juries consider them. That makes it harder for the state to prove their burden beyond a reasonable doubt. The state has a delicate balance. It's got to walk the razor's edge of enough information to prove beyond a reasonable doubt, but not so much the defense is going to be able to get the jury lost. And I think that that's what's happening big time with this Sebastian Rogers investigation. It's gone in so many different directions. Then people started pointing fingers at each other. As soon as you're pointing fingers at me, I'm clamming up. I'm putting up my shield. I'm getting my lawyer involved. You ain't going to get a peep out of me. And that means that good cooperation that would benefit Sebastian Rogers isn't happening because a lawyer like me went to Dad and said, Dad, I know how much you want your kid back. I know how much you want to tell everybody the truth about this person and this historical event and that historical and what you're suspect. You can't. But Josh, I gotta. People are gonna think that I did this. How do I clear my name? You can't. You can't.
I agree with you,
Yeah,
Josh.
once they started stringing you up, there's not a lot you can do.
Yeah, I agree with you that. So we're talking about Seth right now. That's what happened, right? He came front and center, and you know what? All the slews. I can tell you within days, I was getting DM'd with all these documents from California about what a horrible person Seth was. And these slews are good. They dig and they dig and they dig. It was 8 years ago. They thought it should be out there. It's out there. And so Seth, who was coming forward, I think really pleading, he was, taking off work. He asked for some money, which made sense to me since he wasn't working. He asked time off for work, right? It was unpaid. And then now you have everybody saying, oh, he's just trying to get money. So that's why there's a GoFundMe. And then you have some issues with his staff or crew that are searching that really aren't, he doesn't believe doing what's in the best interest of finding Sebastian. The whole thing was such a hot mess on that side of it. It's going to be even worse on the Proudfoot, but we're not there yet on Seth's side. And now he has a new person to look out for him, Tony. And again, the same issues. You're going to have all the slews again go after and try to find out why in the world is this Tony person involved. And then they go after that person, and it just makes the whole thing a colossal mess. So how should someone who has lost their son, missing, they want to get their name out, what's your advice?
The very first thing is to get that trusted spokesperson, professional, licensed, insured, professional person to advise you. And it's not, hey, I'm just going to go out and pick the phone book. No, the worst part about hiring a lawyer is the process of meeting them all. It's dreadful. We know that as lawyers. We know that you want to hire the very first lawyer you talk to because hiring lawyers is dreadful. But you got to take the time because this is important. You got to speak to more than one lawyer. Find a lawyer that you actually have some chemistry and connection with. If you don't have a family counselor already, find people that are like you and talk to their lawyers, because it's like a therapist. It's like a doctor. There are lots of great people in the right position with the right mindset to help you. You just have to make sure for your own sake that you're getting the kind of service provider that's going to match your expectations, your personality, and your chemistry. But the number one thing is to give them the bullhorn. And it's easy. The lawyer stands up and goes, I'm not going to let my client say anything because, as we all know, everyone is a suspect. And you're going to have to starve some of the media. And the media doesn't, I do no comments all the time. The no comments, we all know how it works. It really depends on what the press agent's going to say. Are they going to put no comment and a name? Are they not going to mention it at all? Because that transmits different information. But yeah, you need to be quiet and let someone professionally put forth and manage your narrative as to what happened. And that's going to be, you use fewer words than more. And it's probably going to frustrate you as a client because you want to explain and you want to get into the detail and you want to respond to that commentator or that No, you were speaking to the entire world audience at one point. You don't get the luxury of deciding who hears what you say. And you certainly don't get the luxury of telling them how to interpret what you said and what your intention was. That's where the third-party spokesperson lawyer really comes in, because we're going to be unambiguous. And it isn't going to be as detailed as you want, but it's going to hit the important parts, such as, I wasn't involved. I have a full and complete alibi. I want to get to the bottom of it. You're going to limit the inquiries, and you're also going to gain the protection because hopefully that lawyer tells everybody, don't talk to my client. Don't ask my client anything. My client's not allowed to talk to any of you. Get in front of those statements that are going to come out.
Okay, but let me play a little devil's advocate with you. I'm going to take a very specific case, the Anna Knežević case. She's the lady that moved to Madrid, disappeared. There was great footage.
20 years, yeah.
No, what's that?
Was she the one that left for like 20 years?
No, she just left.
Okay.
And there was a guy that spray painted the cameras. This is in Madrid. She was in the middle of kind of a nasty divorce.
Yep.
The federal authorities have arrested her husband, right? It ends up, at least alleged, it's all about money. But he hired an attorney, a very well-spoken attorney that handled all the media obligations, and he never said a word. I can tell you it looked terrible. I mean, everybody was saying, listen, if you're innocent, why are you hiding behind this? You're supposed to be looking for her. You're supposed to be out there. So don't you think, Schiff, it's a little bit of a double-edged sword when you hide behind somebody and you haven't done anything? Your son's disappeared?
It absolutely is, but it's not like you have a win pathway. People are going to be suspicious and cast aspersions and try to slay you because they're bitter, emboldened, small people. There are people in this world who are just angry and want to burn the world down and prosecute everybody. There are. I've been one of those people at times in my life. It's absolutely usual. The tough part is understanding what's most important, the PR or the win in court. And you're seeing that with a lot of the high profile cases. And Jen, you know this more than anyone. The real story, it gets kind of close to what's reported in the media, but there's so much nuance. There are so many details. No one's going to get unless they were there. And if you really are working in benefit of your client, preventing your client from getting accused, indicted, or convicted of anything, because let's just face it, we convict a lot of innocent people in America. A lot of innocent people plead guilty to stuff they shouldn't have, and the criminal justice system has a lot of horrifyingly bad results that it admits. Remember, we put people to death based on 12-person jurors because the state lies to them. Our system's not perfect, so you got to protect yours. And that means damn the torpedoes when it comes to the public image. You've got to shut up and sit down, because if you arm the state, who is not your friend, the state wants to win cases. They are going to prosecute you and put you in prison if they can. Do not give them anything. I know it's frustrating that you want to stand up and tell everybody how innocent you are, and it looks bad that you're not protesting you're innocent. What does the guiltiest person do? Tell everyone how innocent they are. Don't listen to that universe. Don't listen to the pressure. Oh, you must feel so guilty because you're not telling everybody how innocent. No, listen to your damn attorney. I sleep in my bed every night. I go to jail every day, and I hate it. It's awful.
It is awful.
Keeping you out of jail. That's what matters. So shut up.
So let me give you a little pushback here.
Please.
Being on the prosecution side and law enforcement side, there is no decent law enforcement officer or prosecutor that wants to put anybody that they don't 100% believe in their guilt, that they actually did the crime.
But how many of them? But how many of them are decent?
Well, I think
I love my cop. Man, I represent cops. I got cops that I adore. I got prosecutors I adore. All of them will tell you about the rot that exists in places like Canton, Massachusetts, the FBI, law enforcement in every state. There's bad apples everywhere because public service encourages rot, because we don't kick people out of those jobs. And you know that. You worked for the federal government. If I point at the federal government and want to talk about efficient employment, have you ever gone to the Social Security Agency or a post office? That's who the government is. And now we start saying about law enforcement, there's awesome law enforcement. I love law enforcement. Law enforcement's also some of the biggest crooks in the universe.
There's some bad ones. There's some bad ones.
Just the bad ones. But there's lots of bad ones. It's different from when we were growing up and everybody liked to trust the police. The police have proven they are not to be trusted just blankly, uniformly. That's a shame. It's been a part of the destruction of American culture. How bad cops have ruined law enforcement for so many innocent communities. And we need to keep working on that by paying cops more, having way more cops, and regulating them much more strongly. But
that I'll agree with you with, but I still say it's a small percentage. But if it's 10%, that's still thousands and thousands.
And
so
remember,
I think that's where we agree.
And what percentage of cases actually go to trial?
Oh,
see, I always talk about the fact that the guilty people plead guilty, because guess what? I've been through a bunch of guilty pleas, and you know, when you meet someone, and the case that always comes to mind, even though it's a terrible example, is that Scott Peterson debacle. 20 years, and now they're testing the tape. The cases that are fought the hardest for one of two reasons. The number one is somebody who just really doesn't want to go down and is going to spend every last minute and dollar trying to save themselves and is the ultimate narcissist. And those people are out there. The ultimate narcissist, man, we got way more of those than we think. The other are the actual innocent people. And I've sat with and seen innocent people, and I've worked on innocence cases where really good law enforcement believed someone was guilty, and they weren't.
I want to quickly
pivot
off your Peterson comment, because I think he fits the narcissism. I think that the Los Angeles program of the Innocence Project, which is not the famed Innocence Project that many of my former colleagues work for. So in that case, and remember the hair they want to test, right? It's DNA technology is advanced now, and that's why they can test this hair, because I guess it doesn't have the root, and they're going to be able to get a result, right, where they couldn't all those years ago when that case occurred. So I just wanted to pivot off that. That's not what we're talking about today,
No.
but I'm glad you brought it up. It's still to your point that these cases drag on, and they drag on when everything isn't fully done the first go around.
Yeah.
You know,
And it's the importance of well-funding law enforcement to do really sufficient investigations. The hardest case to defend against is the one the law enforcement put together really well. And we see it. Like, there are prosecutors who, when you go up against them and you know how well they have assembled their case, you know how well they've worked with their law enforcement to make sure that the investigation was fulsome and sufficient and they covered all the bases. It makes my job darn right impossible, because I can't find a little hole in their armor to go explore, because that's really my job. Remember, I don't have to care about innocence or guilt. That's one of the great joys about my job, being in the actual Constitution. Like, I have a job in the Constitution. I am supposed to test the state. I get to follow things that other people wouldn't think are reasonable, because I have to zealously defend them and work really hard, even if my heart's not into it, even if my heart doesn't believe that there is. I still have to do my job, because that's how we keep the promise of the Constitution that only the guilty get convicted. And that gets into some pretty existential stuff at that point.
Well, and my hat goes off to you, Schiff, because you might not know this, but right after I graduated, one of the internships that I was going to do, I should say right before I graduated from undergrad, the internship was with a defense attorney, a prominent criminal defense attorney. And I sat in on an interview with an alleged murderer, and he was the murderer. He talked about the murder, and I quit. I mean, I just told the attorney, I said, I can't do this.
Yeah.
It takes a special person to be able to see the big picture of our Constitution and what that means, which I do understand that, and I want that. I want zealous representation. I love the fact that Koberger is getting haircuts and hair gel and getting to go to church and eating vegan and well taken care of, because I don't want that to be the issue that we see in Delphi, right? I want everything to be pristine and how things should run, right? So I do understand that. But by the same token, I just personally, I think it's hard to represent somebody.
It is. And really, I'm doing a case tomorrow that, not to get too much into the weeds, where it is uncontroverted that my client woke up in the morning, was asked to drive his younger brother. It's 11 o'clock on Saturday. He was out late the night before, as I've done a million, as my judge has done, as my DA has done. And while driving, he had a single car wreck that cost the life of his younger brother.
Mm.
And he had a elevated alcohol content from the night before. Mm. He wasn't supposed to be driving that morning. No, he just was hey, bring your brother over. Mm. He's going to prison tomorrow. Like, we've already said, we're pleading guilty. Tomorrow is the non-negotiated resolution of a capital kind of case where we're going to walk in and only one of us is going to leave. Mm-hmm. And it gives me a lot of personal satisfaction to know that I get to serve and call the fellows in creation at their hardest point, because this is a good man. He worked for law enforcement in New York, completely impeccable record, never been arrested, was a, believe it or not, bus driver. Like, this guy's a great guy. And on this Saturday morning, his entire life changed without any intent.
Yeah. No, I agree, Schiff. There are, I think very rewarding parts of a defense attorney's job, but I'm going to go back to, we're going to switch now. I think we covered Seth pretty well.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, I had one more question on Seth, though. He recently started a YouTube channel. The reason he started a YouTube channel is because they want to get the message out. They want to keep Sebastian's name and everything out there. And he was tired of going on these YouTube channels and feeling like he was taken advantage of, that the questions, that they were just setting him up for issues. What do you think about the father of a missing person having a YouTube channel? Just
absolutely terrible idea. Absolutely terrible idea. I know how much people want to stand up and be heard. No, stop it. Stop it. That is narcissism, because you are just trying to satisfy your own failings about, I'm not getting the message out, I'm not doing the right thing, I'm not being the good dad, at the expense of your child's well-being, and you are exposing yourself to so many different things. You are making the eventual state's case weaker. You really are. If you're not involved, you're making the state's case weaker. I know you don't think so, but trust me, I'm a jerk lawyer. We can turn your words around. It's what happens. The more mess you add to the fire, it's people just throwing buckets of twigs every time you get out there and talk out of school, because he's going to be mentioning the relations with the mom. He's going to be complaining about this person's fairness or that person's fairness. And that friction, that discussion itself detracts from what's really important, which is Sebastian finding him and getting justice for what happened, if anything, because as unlikely as I believe it, there's still theoretically the fact that a 15-year-old autistic kid just wandered away and disappeared and they haven't found him. I don't buy a lot of that. I think there's a little bit more. I definitely think someone else was involved. But the dad getting a YouTube channel, especially with the blessing of some media, horrible. Stop it.
Okay, another question.
Sit down.
What do you do if you're Seth Rogers and you don't have the money to hire a competent legal person to help you out? What do you recommend there?
First of all, there are going to be lawyers. It will be harder to find someone at a very low price point or pro bono. But believe it or not, there are religious groups, social groups, civil rights groups, that if you need someone, they're there. Plus, remember, there's victim witness groups that work for almost every jurisdiction. Georgia, we spend more money on victim witness advocates than I even want to think about. Now, the problem there is these aren't your lawyers. Those are lawyers that work for other people and that you're getting the benefit of their assistance, but they're not really your lawyer necessarily. But it is important. And if you don't have guidance, please just be quiet. Don't talk. Listen to the detective. Law enforcement does not want you going out there and talking to the world. I promise they don't. It's influencing their ability to investigate the case. Law enforcement doesn't want bad leads. It wants accurate leads. It wants a broad net for identification, but they do not want to spend their entire resources chasing down a bunch of garbage that is filtering in from wackadoodles on the internet.
What about GoFundMes? What's your opinion, your guidance on that for these parents?
So first of all, GoFundMes and accepting charity money, it's not just something you just do. You just don't put your hand out there and say, hey, everybody give me some money. No. And you can run afoul of a bunch of different issues, especially if you're letting some third party handle your GoFundMe. Your GoFundMe ideally should be coordinated if you have a lawyer or accountant or other financial fiduciary professional, because they're not allowed to rob you and just say, I robbed you. Regular people can rob you. And literally, people screw each other and stab each other in the back all the time. And without that professional accreditation, licensure, ethics, it's much easier for someone to say, no, I didn't have an agreement with them. Versus with a lawyer or another professional, they're going to make sure everything is done above board, because everyone gets protected. Protection isn't just a one-way street. Protection flows both ways. And you're going to want protection for anything you do that involves money, because once money's involved, people take a lot of interest in it. And as soon as money's there to go grab, people are going to go with their grubby paws and try to get it and get in on it and get in on making it. Because it's not even, hey, I hosted the GoFundMe. No, I'm going to host a raffle. I'm going to do content. There are so many different ways that people try to drum up revenues from the general public that may be well-intentioned, but they may also be illegal. They may be wrongfully directed. I mean, come on. Every disaster has scam after scam of fake GoFundMe, fake help me pages. And my real suggestion, if you want to help somebody, find someone in your community. Go find a non-governmental organization that's legitimate, doing good stuff. There are people in your community that need your direct input, be it financial or your time. And very often time's more important than the money. So before you start stroking checks out to random people's GoFundMes all over the internet for a case that you don't even know the first damn thing about, why don't you stick to something local? Why don't you go stick to something that you know, where you can really make a difference and not just be some, facilitator for whatever shenanigans are out there.
Okay, Ship, we're going to switch now to the Proudfoots, because the Proudfoots to me are in a different segment than Seth, from the standpoint of they are being highly scrutinized, I think, by law enforcement, because you're always looking at who had the opportunity to possibly commit a crime. And I think Katie and Chris had more of an opportunity, certainly, than Seth. So now they have some things that are on their plate very recently. They have tried to put in an order of protection against Bullhorn Betty, who is a YouTuber. She's been involved in a lot of cases. And the point is, she's gone to their campsite. I've seen, a lot of the footage. She's gone by their house. She certainly is doing this, I think, as a boots on the ground YouTuber. There's a lot of them out there that are trying to show people, look, he's lying. He says he's here, but he's really not here, blah, 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 blah. What do you think about this order that she's trying to get? And what do you think about social media YouTubers and so forth doing this sort of action?
So it's as nuanced and multifaceted as you can get. I'm a huge fan of citizen journalism. Citizens are really the best witnesses for what happens in life, and they're a necessary part because they're the corpus that makes up our communities. So you have to have their involvement, and a more involved community, the better. I wish everybody could name their local judges. I just wish they didn't name them because of the mistakes that the judges had made. I think everybody should know who their chief of police is, just not because they kept on some people that probably shouldn't be cops anymore. People really should be involved in their community. Unfortunately, this is not what's happening with where the line is between community organizers and interested notable people and the outright harassment of private people. That's a tough line to draw. And I've seen it in lots of different cases, and I've seen all the different justifications. Oh, I'm just the press investor. I'm just a private concerned citizen about these dangerous people in my community. Reverse roles, because that's what a judge is going to do. And the judge is going to look at someone and say, hey, this family has suffered a crime. Their child is missing. A bad thing happened. What is the public doing to them? And what are the specific actions that are being complained about when it comes to something like a protective order? A protective order in all 50 states is a civil order. It is a quasi-criminal order because it's a civil order that results in criminal sanctions if it's violated. And remember how most of them are going to be couched. It's couched from what the listener, the petitioner who asked for that order, how they feel, not the intent of the actor being complained against, but how reasonable is it for the petitioner holder of that restraining order, protective, or whatever you want to call it? how do they reasonably interpret the actions that have caused them to ask for this remedy? And guess what? Going by their house, harassment, intimidation. Going online and screaming their name and attaching a whole bunch of people and frothing about, man, Judge Josh finds that pretty intentionally harassing. And if your job, whether you want to call it a job, is to gain clicks through saying whatever is possible, I'm going to find that harassing, especially if you're doing it with a pecuniary intent where you're making any kind of money. And that's really where I get wound up against some of these people on the inner tubes, is because let's just cut to, they don't care. They care about clicks. They care about explosive, salacious allegations not based in truth, and digging up gotcha photographs and statements and misconstruing and mispresenting things so that people, in their ever hungering need to not be in trouble and to point out how other people are bad because it reflects on their own insecurities inside, they're going to go click on that stuff and generate revenues through advertising. So I fully support these families who are somehow connected to a tragedy exercising their rights to have the state protect them from the inherent harassment and abuse that some scrutiny brings. But where's that line? And I don't have a great read on where that line exactly is, because it's up to the petitioner. It's up to the Proudfoot. It's up to the set to get up there and say, hey, this is the person who's harassing me. This is the way the harassment is taking place. But I absolutely feel that these protective orders are valid. I'm already consulting and talking about different ways to go sue different producers of media because of some of the stuff that we've encountered from certain people on the internet. Because guess what? I get complaints about that person said this, and most of the time I'm like, no, I'm staying out of it. There are a couple that are really above and beyond the pale and are violating, in my opinion, and 12 people. I'll put it in front of 12 people. I'll ask 12 people, is that person, that content creator, are they doing this for legitimate reasons? Or are they intentionally harassing, abusing, intimidating these private citizens? And more importantly, are they interfering with law enforcement investigation? Because that's really what some of these people have done by going and talking to witnesses, by going and, trying to insert themselves before trial. You're now stomping all over the toes of law enforcement. And where there's a benefit, yes, the public gets to, get in there and investigate and show the press. That's great. You want to be press? Go be press. But if you're just a jerk neighbor who's harassing someone because you are going to present some piece of gotcha information, man, I hope you get sued into the ground, and I'll be the guy to yank your last pennies away so you can't pay your mortgage. Because guess what you're doing? It's wrong. It's wrong. You are not the self-appointed spokesman. You have freedom of speech. That freedom comes with accountability and costs. Free speech ain't free. You can spend your way into the poorhouse if you free speech your way into a lawsuit. And especially when it's combined with physical actions. And now we have allegations of literally witnesses having drive-bys and organized things. I think it'll be fascinating when it hits the courts.
So let me ask you about this, because I want to stay on the Proudfoots, because there have been a lot of issues and allegations against the Proudfoots. I was shocked when I saw some of the allegations from neighbors in terms of how Chris Proudfoot treated Sebastian. It's horrific. I mean, I think it's clear that, to me, as an advocate and somebody who wants to get the story out, I think the only reason it's important is to point out why he would want to leave, right? I mean, if we didn't hear that there were any issues with abusive behavior or being hit or beaten or, kept in a garage or some of the other things we've heard, it doesn't really compute that the person would necessarily want to leave, right?
Yeah.
But when you put it all together, you kind of end up with a situation as to why Sebastian might want to leave and why Sebastian might feel like he had no place to go. Again, if the scenario is true that nothing happened to him and that he actually was allowed to leave that house. So Katie and Chris, as you may know, all over everything, YouTube, local news, national news, and then now they've really shut it down. They have an attorney. I think that is the reason why.
Oh yeah, an attorney yanked their cord in a second and said, "You people are nuts," because it's tasteless and it's gross, and it exposes them to more of the harassment that they're complaining against. And that's really, again, why you sit down and shut up. If you're out there running your mouth, you don't get the protection against the harassers because you're out there, you're participating. You can only gain the righteous high ground by shutting up. If you're going to subject yourself to the slings and the arrows of the conversation, because you're jumping it, man, ain't nobody gonna feel bad for you. It's like celebrities. You know how there are some celebrities that you hear about in paparazzi every single day? Guess what? They like it. They're out there. They're encouraging that, because there are unbelievably famous celebrities that you never see pictures of, that lead quiet, dignified lives outside of the spotlight. Not that people don't want to take tons of pictures of them, but because they know how to run their life in a respectful, decent way and have some decorum, as opposed to flaying yourself out in the streets like you're selling everything God gave you, which is exactly what some of these people, the moment they get that littlest bit of notoriety, start to do. And it's gross. And really, I don't feel bad for the bad results that then happen to those people, because you asked for it. When you had the opportunity to do the right thing, sit down, shut up, and let law enforcement do their job, you could have done that. You didn't.
Okay, so let me juxtapose, though, exactly what you're saying, Schiff, and go to, when I look at Seth, I see a father that is looking, he's out searching, he's organizing flyers, he's spending money on wristbands. He really seems to be out there, obviously putting himself out there. And then you look at the Proudfoots, who are never seen looking or having any part of searching. I got to tell you, it looks really bad.
Looks awful. Looks awful. Makes me want to go grab and be like, what are you doing? Do you care about your kid? Or do you care about your PR? It's off. And I love casting bad aspersions. Remember, court is and law is just an exercise of your prejudice. It's all it is. Voir dire, prejudice central. It is all of your presupposed beliefs about people that are unproven because you don't know them, manifesting as justice. Like justice, law enforcement, it is the criminal justice. It is the home of unfounded beliefs about people you don't really know. Hence why we have a jury system and questions and answers and evidence, and we do a review so that we can eventually arrive at what the truth is. But from the front end, before there's been any corroboration, before there's been any witness statements, when you have people do and act in a way that does nothing but beg you to suspect them, and that's all on them, because you're right. I look at them and I say, hold on, you're the responsible parties. It's your 15-year-old special needs child that you know about. You're the best person on notice to make sure that this child has the extra protections that someone may need. I put the onus on them because she's the one with custody. He's the stepfather. That's their responsibility. And if I'm Seth, I'm pissed. Hey, baby mom, I thought you were going to have a household that ran better, knowing that we have a 15-year-old child with special needs that may be susceptible to additional threats that other children wouldn't be as susceptible from. And why don't you have some very basic stuff set up to prevent a wandering autistic child. If you had a 90-year-old Alzheimer's patient and you just put him in the living room, you'd be reckless if they wandered off and died. It'd be gross negligence. And that's kind of what I see in some of this, because I don't know what degree of involvement any of these people had in Sebastian Rogers' actual disappearance. I do know more could have been done to prevent it.
Well, just even like cameras.
Yeah, it's literally.
Let's just start with the easy stuff. Interior cameras, exterior cameras, when you know it's a possibility, especially considering.
Exactly. You got a 15-year-old kid. Where are you monitoring his phone? Where do you have his phone tracked? There's so many things you can do. But again, you're asking a lot from parents who are already doing a lot. And my heart goes out to any parent of a special needs child. I've got special needs people in my family, and it's an extra burden. And while we would love to believe everybody handles burdens fantastically and achieves, no, lots of people don't perform at the way we'd like them to when they face some of these special burdens. And unfortunately, we see young children, especially special needs young children, I don't want to say abandoned by their parents, but their parents don't have the skills, the support, or the safety net to care for them. And our government's not really great at assisting parents, depending on what state you're in. And I feel for these parents who are basically trying to find their way how to protect and raise their kids without as much social guidance as I'd like to believe is out there.
I have to deter just a second on this point, and then we'll, circle back. But, my brother has cerebral palsy. He was born breech. He lost for about 10 seconds oxygen. So he can read at about an 18-year-old level. He had a lot of different jobs, bagging groceries and changing condiments at the Cowboys Stadium. But you know what I found? And he lives, even though he's young, he lives in an old folks home. And they're great. They love him.
Love it.
He's like the young guy.
My cousin was the same with Downs, and they loved it. Yeah.
It's so great. But the one ingredient, this is just my opinion, the one ingredient that solves all, at least in my existence and what I know from my experience, is love.
Yeah.
It's so amazing. If you just treat that child like you love your pet or you love your dog, and I'm not saying they're a pet or a dog, I'm just saying, how can people have that much love all the time? I see it for animals, and not show that same amount of attention, with their special needs. That's all you really need. I think.
It drives me nuts how our society is so focused on so many downward facing things when we could really spend some more time focusing on the upward facing things, like the absolute love that these people, these special people in creation, they were created just like you, just like me. They have the same value as you and me. And we should celebrate and lean in and give them that love, because you're absolutely right, Jen. Those people and the love that they deserve, that's what makes the world a better place.
And the love they return is amazing, because it's without, they don't have any reasoning. You're right.
Yeah. It's unconditional. It's love because it's love.
Yeah. And they don't have ulterior motives. That's what I want to say. It's not that they do something special for you because they're hoping something. No, they just love you. It's pretty special.
It's why also I have such a feeling that those are the people who deserve the highest protections and the highest levels of service from whatever community they live in, because they were put here without the same sophistication and protections for whatever reason. And it's our obligation to take that much better care of them. And that's the high calling.
I agree, Schiff. And that, I think, is why so many people, this case, with all the missing cases, is, that and the fact that it's going, past 5 months. Where are we at right now? Over 5 months. And we can't understand what happened to this child. But I want to go back to the Proudfoots again to get us. So what advice right now? They're being quiet. They're not talking. They've put in this protective order. What advice do you give the Proudfoots at this juncture?
They need to sit down and shut up. Get out of the spotlight. They aren't helping anybody. The search for Sebastian needs to be focused on Sebastian and the mechanics of a broad, long-term search. He will pop up at some point if he is still walking around, God forbid. Like it is very hard to permanently kidnap and disappear someone that is youthful, especially someone who's special need. You don't just hide them in the backyard. Now that does make me very worried for his health and safety. That is absolutely terrifying to me. But this family needs to take the right road and shut up. Sit down. This is not your opportunity to get famous. This is not your obligation to share this, that. No. Go work with law enforcement partners. Go work with legitimate third parties, non-governmental organizations of size, not Steve and his 501(c)(3) that swears he saves some kids. No, you got to go work with real groups, the National Organization for Missing and Exploited Children, legitimate groups that have these resources and legitimacy, because they'll also protect you from the people that are trying to do you harm in the name of good. No one will rob you and mistreat you more than someone who's promised you all these great things. It's absolute sin at so many levels. Sorry. I really don't like fraud people, and the people that are out there that will just defraud these people in tragedy and trauma. You want to talk low? Go take advantage of somebody fraudulently at their lowest moment. Now that you go straight to hell for that one.
So back to the Proudfoots, because as we talked about, they don't have really their fingerprint at all on searching, on passing out flyers, on being at all part of the finding. This is what I found interesting. And I know a lot of people can't stand Bullhorn Betty. You mentioned it's time to sort of put it in, not mentioning her per se, but to people harassing. But my whole thing is, if this is my child, I think that's the last thing I'm going to be worrying about. That some YouTuber that is that kind of boots on the ground type of YouTuber drove by my house once and did a film, like going 40 miles an hour, or was looking at my empty camper. I don't think I would even know about it. I mean that.
And that's it.
It's shocking to me they even care that you. But again, everybody responds differently. I'm not trying to be judgmental. It's shocking.
It obviously became known to them so much that they focused on it to take the steps to take out a restraining order. Like, it wasn't just a one-time thing.
Sure.
First of all, to get a restraining order, you have to show a habit or practice. It can't just be a one-time harassing event. One-time harassing event's more likely to be a crime. But it's the habit and repetition. But it's the mere fact that whatever these outside agitatory, talky, whatever people, that they've intruded into the personal life of the Proudfoots to whatever degree they have, that would cause them to actually need to bring a protective order. Because really the other problem is the focus, the masthead for any group. It's not necessarily the one doing the bad stuff. You've got these anonymous trolls. You've got these terrible people who hide behind the anonymity of the internet and everything else. They're the ones more likely than not to actually break the law clearly. And that it's scary. It's the copycat issue. And we know that sick, twisted people love copycatting other sick, twisted people because they're not creative and they can't think of the thing to do themselves. So they copy someone. And it sucks, but those bad people, unfortunately, are out there. I'm one of those criminal defense lawyers who just firmly believes a certain percentage of the American population deserves to be in prison because they're bad. Sorry, I just do. I've met too many people. I've represented some bad people. And while I am Mr. Stand Up, defense, there's some people that really deserve to be exiled, that deserve never to be in population again. And it's arguably for more things than people want to talk about.
So Schiff, would you, if you put your hat on, you are now representing the Proudfoots, would you tell them, listen, you better start getting out there, or would you just say hunker down and don't search?
I take away all their cell phones. I take away all their computers. I lock them down. I tell them I don't want to hear one peep from them in the public. I don't want to hear a tweet, because you got to also starve these people. You got to starve the trolls. As soon as someone's not getting a response of the stimulus back, they move on to the next thing. People are desperate for attention and stimulus. So if they poke you a million times and you don't poke back, they find someone else to poke. I've represented people who have literally had front page of the paper crimes. I'm talking domestic terrorism. I have had the cameras show up, and everybody sit down, shut up. Oh, Josh, aren't you going to talk to the media? Well, you know the media so well. Yeah, I know the media so well. Shut up. I'm not talking to them. You're not talking to them. Why? 48 hours, no one cares. Most news stories only continue to exist. People continue to come back to them because there's more news. If you starve them, if you don't participate and you don't engage, there's no story for people to attach to. And American populace is fickle. If you're not tickling them back, they will go find somewhere else to get their tickle.
But wait, Schiff, wait. That's not what you want. If it's my child and I have Sebastian Rogers and I'm mama, I want all eyes on him.
Nope.
I want flyers out. I want people looking. I want people understanding there's a story. Because if they don't understand there's a story, look at Connor Jack Oswald. 2.5 years later, somebody recognized him homeless. Again, autistic young man who walked away, and in his teens, 2.5 years later, was found alive, homeless, only because his family kept the flyers out.
And do you think you, mom and dad, is going to be able to do that as effectively as some of these well-composed, managed, long-standing, deeply rooted roots? Yeah, and it's great that you're going to put some posters up in the neighborhood. It is nothing compared to the reach and effectiveness of organizations that are dedicated to doing exactly that. And you're going to get the benefit of not being strung up in public for the slings and arrows and tomatoes getting thrown by everybody. Because I don't care how perfect and innocent and wonderful you are. There's always some contrarian that is going to get their rocks, is going to get their clicks by trashing you. I don't care how amazing you are. Someone is going to get their jollies by hating on you. It is the American way. We are the rudest, nastiest people in the world because of our free speech, and it's a sacred, wonderful thing. But I don't care if you just saved 1,000 children while donating your lottery winnings. Someone hates you for that.
They do.
And they're just gonna run you up a pole. Like literally, there's not a position you can take where some jerk isn't gonna come out there and tell you exactly why you're wrong and why they're right now. And you can get in the mud with that pig and wrestle. It's just you're gonna end up covered in mud, and the pig likes it. It's what these mini cottage industries that we're seeing with some of these very specific regional cases are. I was laughing with some true crime people nationally earlier about how there's the focus is on this part and this part and this. Give it a year, give it 6 months. All these people all wound up like the world is going to end and thinking that what they're doing is so important. It is right now for this brief moment.
So Schiff, your advice, this wonderful free attorney advice right now for both parties, hire
a lawyer to do everything.
And in terms of money and in terms of coordination of search efforts, get a professional group, but get it all managed through a licensed attorney that has responsibility if they do something wrong.
And yeah, exactly. You need someone who ethically has obligations to you, to treat you right, where there's enforceability in a professional relationship, because that's what prevents people ostensibly from taking advantage of you. And trust me, lawyers aren't perfect. We got plenty of crook-ass lawyers out there that rob people and do terrible things. One of the most famous lawyers in Georgia right now, who I'm not going to name, but every one of you has seen this particular lawyer nationally. For the last 30 years, every time there is a prominent political headline, oh my God, something case, they go out and they poach that case from the lawyer who's actually representing the person. And this is a very wealthy lawyer. And the very wealthy lawyer comes in and says, hey, I'm going to represent you. Oh, I can't afford you. Don't worry about it. And that very good lawyer rides the headline and then charges their mega dope dealer federal clients that we all hate because they really are poisoning America, and makes all of their money doing federal dope cases. Even though they're known for their couple of big high profile headline chasers and lawyers, God, it's like an addiction. So be careful. It's not easy. But the client advice is sit down, shut up, do not stick your head up. Get somebody else to do that for you. Jen, and I will close with this. I've watched This Old House for basically my entire life, and I can tell you more about buildings and houses and custom furniture and in-floor heating and HVAC and plumbing. I can tell you about fixtures. I can do a lot of that stuff. I really could. I mean, I could go down to Home Depot, spend a bunch of money. I could probably build my own house. It'd be a house. I guarantee it would suck next to anybody that took more than one semester of shop, because that's kind of where I did. And get the professionals. Get the professionals. You don't understand the perspective and vagaries of what the cruelty of open society will do if you are subject to inquiry, because the world's cruel and it'll eat you up. And you should not have to deal with that, all while dealing with such a traumatic thing such as the potential loss of your adored special needs kid.
I love it. It's a great point. Go to a professional. I was so excited to cut this up with you because it's something that's really, really concerned me. You know, I see it happening more and more. And thank you so much for spending all this time with us.
You know how much I love talking with you, Jen. You and I get along great. We come from different parts of the universe, but I love the conversation. I really do. I love the fact that you're one of the places that we can actually have a good conversation in true crime. And that is amazingly interesting and valuable to me.
Me too, Chef. So again, thank you. And until next time, everyone, may justice be served. And thank you again, Chef.
Thank you all so much. And have a great week, everybody. We have the best damn system in the world. Doesn't mean we can't keep improving it every single day.
Thank you. Bye, Chef. Bye everyone.